Orange juice, anti-gay.
Hello and welcome to Ruben Uncut. Today I'm here with local improv comedian and good friend Thomas Skala. Now Thomas was been wanting to have Thomas on my program for a while, and the topic that he thought he wanted to talk about was moral panics.
Oral panics.
Yes. Say hi to the people, Thomas.
Hi, how's it going? Long-time listener, first-time interviewee.
All right, awesome.
Okay.
I don't know if I can qualify myself as an interviewer, but we will be having a conversation, and I probably will have questions for you.
I hope I have answers. I am not a sociologist.
Yes, of course. If you are a sociologist and you'd like to come on the program and correct anything that we say, please feel free. Unless you feel like voting for RFK Jr. Just kidding. I would still talk to you.
I would love to see that episode.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. All right, but anyways, we're going to be talking about moral panics. All right. So
first of all, have you heard the phrase personally?
I have heard the phrase moral panics. I'm familiar with it. Now, what year did you say you first became aware of it?
I first heard about this. This is mentioned on some podcasts that I listened to. So I kind of had this idea of like a vague generalization. I'm like, oh, a moral panic. And they would cite instances, most primarily was the Satanic Panic of the 80s,
Yep,
which touched on a bunch of different things.
That was a big one, real popular.
Huge one.
D&D, big part of that.
D&D, lyrics. Well, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yes.
So anyway, I was like, okay, well, let me see what these moral panics are. So it turns out that a sociologist by the name of Stanley Cohen, Cohen, had written about it in the late 60s for his doctoral thesis, which he was building around this idea of moral panics.
Okay.
In 1973, he published a book that is for people who aren't in the sciences called Folk Demons and Moral Panics. Ruben, do you want to guess what a folk demon is? Knowing what a folk hero is and what context we're talking about it in, you probably can figure it out.
I would theorize that you're referring to some type of archetypical characters, or possibly even stereotypes that lend themselves to the negative side of what we would consider I don't know, I guess the opposite of heroes.
Right, yeah. So the villains,
okay.
These are the people who the moral panics are panicked about. Mm-hmm.
So the villainization of people in our society.
These are real people, not stereotypes. Stereotypes are built off of these poorly informed concepts of who these people are, and that's used to create more panic.
Okay.
So the basic idea of a moral panic is that it is a social situation where there is an out group that's threatening the status quo. And that's what the moral panic is about. It's like, what are we going to do about these people? How are they affecting our way of life? Everything is changing. I'm scared. These people are to blame. In a nutshell.
So it's like the furthest extension of sort of like reactionary thought.
It's really well thought out reactionary thoughts with a bunch of people contributing. So you have individuals, you have the media. In fact, since the 70s, new ideas have come out in sociology about this idea of moral panics, because there's not just news sources anymore. We have social networks and things where we get information and get ideas about what's going on in the world that aren't delivered to us in a regular like 11 o'clock news program.
And often it's connected to like fear of change.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Like I don't know if it ever reached a moral panic, but like even like almost every media is pushed back on by older generations. Even
the telephone.
Even books. When like literacy became commonplace, books were considered to be like a negative like thing for kids, that it would somehow either like give them bad ideas.
I mean,
I mean, some books have.
This just sounds like people who want to control information flow.
I mean, possibly, yeah. I mean, which is probably what some of the moral panic is.
Probably.
So yeah.
Would you like to go over some historical cases?
Sure.
Now, the first thing, my first thought before I really went into any research, was like, oh, Salem witch trials.
Yeah.
Right?
I was just thinking it.
Yeah, that's like the first thought. And then, but I think a lot of sociologists are basically saying that that's more of a hysteria.
Okay.
Because
so is that a step further, or
it's kind of a different thing? I'm not too sure. Not a sociologist, but no, I get the idea. Because
I mean, moral panics seem to contain at least some level of hysteria,
right? But the idea with the witch hunts, which why it's not really a clear cut moral panic, is because there was no out group that was villainized. Because anyone could be a witch.
Okay, all right.
So, like, if your friend has been stuck in the ducking stool and drowned, then you could say that someone else is a witch. You know.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
that turns into hysteria.
I mean, the Salem witch trial. I mean, technically, it's an out group, but like it's an out group that you can accuse anyone of being part of without any evidence.
Yeah.
So technically, anyone could be part of it.
I mean,
although, yeah. I mean, like, what about? So of course there was the Red Scare, but there was also the.
Oh, you looked at my list already?
I've not looked at your list. I'm just familiar with some of these things, but like around the same time as the Red Scare, there was also the. I'm forgetting the color.
Lavender.
Yes, yeah. Lavender Scare. But you've written them down, so we can go to these things as points.
So we'll start out.
Do you have the moral panic over comic books?
I do. I wanted to start with that one because coming into more modern times, that's the first one chronologically. So that was primarily the 30s through the 50s.
Yes.
So that predates all these other moral panics that we're going to talk about. So if you would like to talk about that a little,
I can talk about it a little bit. It was originally based on a book. Oh shit, I'm forgetting the author's name. Well, the guy who basically was sort of the guy, one of the forefront of like starting the panic off, was this psychologist, and he had written a book on juvenile delinquency. He believes that comic books encourage juvenile delinquency and homosexuality among the young readers. Like, now, to be fair, like, for the time, some comic books were kind of edgy and racy. Like, they were all very violent, and then some of them were pretty sexual for the time. Although I need to stress this: what was considered sexual for the time would be considered pretty tame by today's standards. Like just women in like superhero costumes that would basically look like one or possibly even more modest two-piece bathing suits of today.
Yeah, I really never thought about what superheroes would look like without spandex.
Well, I mean, the spandex thing has to do with like wrestlers and strongmen from like carnivals and stuff.
Oh yeah,
that's why they wear trunks on the outside of their pants, because that was the thing that they did, so it wouldn't be so obvious that your dick was hanging out.
That's always a bonus.
So like that's the purpose of the trunk, so your dick's not just in everybody's face.
Yeah. Thank you.
Don't thank me. I didn't make it put it on.
So we have that. New media, that's a thing. So that's the enemy. New media. It's corrupting our children. It's very clearly there's this structure in place.
It is worth noting. I don't know if this was brought up in the actual thing, but like I'm sure some people at the time were thinking about it, but like a large percentage of the people who made comic books were Jewish and Italian people.
Oh, there you go. I forgot to mention the number one. The first chronological thing I'd written down the list was every anti-Semitic conspiracy theory is of a sort a moral panic.
But yeah, no, like comic books, a lot of the people who worked in comic books were like Italian and Jewish immigrants, or like second generation Jewish and Italian immigrants. Very common amongst the people who worked in comic books. I mean, I mean, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, who both were making comic books at this time, but Stan Lee hadn't really. He was just a kid at this time, and he hadn't really found his voice in comic books yet. Unlike Jack Kirby, who created Captain America in this time period. But both Jewish dudes. A lot of speculation has been brought to the fact that like a lot of Batman characters, as they were drawn in the early 40s, were considered to have like Jewish traits. The standard look for like a lot of superhero like leading men was like this like dark hair, blue eyes type deal, because like Italians and like Jewish people from certain areas where that was more common traits. Also, I don't have an explanation for this, but like the Irish coded sidekicks, very common in comic books. Just like gingers, redheads, and of course like Irish police officers, because that was the stereotype of the time. Although there's a lot of reasons why that stereotype exists, but that doesn't really relate to the moral panic. But a lot of interesting things were put forward in the book that was called Seduction of the Innocent. I kind of want to read it, but I don't think it's in print anymore because, well, it was largely considered a book based on a moral panic. But he had a lot of wacky theories. And one of the claims he made was that there were subliminal messages in comic books.
Oh my gosh. We're going to talk about that a few more times, I think.
He actually specifically, like, there was one example was he tried to indicate that like this triangular shadowing on like I think it was Batman's shoulder or something actually represented like the like pubic area of a woman, to like sexually arouse and excite.
When I see a V, I go crazy. You know that.
Yeah, no. Yeah. I guess pubic hair was common back then, so like I guess that's what they were thinking. I wish I could remember the guy's name. I'm gonna have to Google it or something. But like it led all the way up into like congressional hearings against the comic book industry. And basically the comic book industry saved itself by agreeing to a really strict level of censorship.
Yeah, self-censorship.
Yes, self-censorship. They created their own
is that the Hays
independent
Code? Or is that something else?
I think they might have been separate, but for a long time there was the Comics Code Authority.
Oh, right.
Which was like this bureaucracy that was created by comic books, and it existed because you couldn't sell a comic book on a newsstand without the approval of the Comics Code Authority. It was essentially how it worked. And for a long time, they had it eroded over time, and like it eroded kind of weirdly. Like if you go back to the 90s and read DC and Marvel comics, one weird thing you will notice is that they have different sets of swear words they're using. Like in a Marvel comic, for the 90s, I could have found words like crap and ass and crap and ass and like pissed off.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't see those in a DC comic. In a DC comic, I would see hell or damn.
Hey, all right.
Or yeah. But you would never see ass in a DC comic, like the word ass. But you could occasionally see it in like in a Marvel one. Although crap was the real one that stood out to me as one you could find in Marvel comics, but not in DC ones. And like it was like they took all the PG swear words and were like, okay, you take those ones, we'll take these ones. But like that stuff all like gradually came apart, and that was still when the Comics Code Authority was a real thing. Although by the 90s, both Marvel and DC had lines of comics that were sold direct to comic book stores, because comic book stores didn't need that regulation. They were specialty shops.
Right.
So you could sell any type of comic book in a comic book store, which is one of the reasons comic book stores exist, to be completely honest, probably. Although they did come about before comic books started getting real wild. Comic book specialty stores was a thing that Jack Kirby predicted too early. Jack Kirby was way ahead of his time in a lot of publishing things, but that's not important to this point. The point is that the Thomas Code Authority brought in like really strong restrictions on the comics. This also started the thing in the 50s where DC was suddenly like, because the other thing was he accused Batman and Robin of being gay. That actually comes from this guy's book, like as like sort of like a pedophilic like grooming situation. That there's like this man with an inappropriate relationship with this like 12-year-old boy. Because in the 1940s, like he was like 12 years old. Like for some reason that kid sidekicks was not considered weird at that point because like it was common in like adventure stories and whatnot.
What does a 12-year-old do?
Well,
he can't lift more than 60 pounds easily.
Well, you know, he's a trained acrobat from the circus. Okay, that's part of his background. I don't know what the other teenage sidekicks deals were.
Not much, man.
I mean,
easily replaceable.
Seems
like it's a.
I mean, Bucky's the Winter Soldier now, but like he used to be a 12-year-old boy in the 40s.
Look how he turned out.
Yeah, and you got Toro, who disappeared after the Golden Age, but that's the Human Torch's sidekick. Yeah, weirdly enough, the Human Torch not human in the 40s.
Well, this has been comics chat with Ruben.
Well, hold on. This is a couple. So, like the restrictions that they put on the comics after that were the ones that were really excessive. I mean, were you couldn't show any details to committing a crime. Like if there was something that you could possibly teach a person about committing a crime, that could not be committed. That could not be in a comic, which destroyed any type of like mystery solving element from crime comics.
Oh, right.
So because
Batman stops being a detective.
So yeah, no, because his stories get super wacky in the 50s. And I brought up the Batman gay thing because the 1950s is also the late 50s, early 60s is when they introduce Batwoman and Batgirl, two different characters from who they are now, but originally intended to be love interests for Batman and Robin, who are both appropriate aged and heterosexual.
Good. Yes. Very straight men need women.
Yeah. So the idea was that they could have these like
they could have double dates.
Yeah. No, exactly. So that everyone would know Batman and Robin are gay now. Obviously. So although hilariously, when they brought back Batwoman, they did make her a lesbian.
Well, whatever.
Hey, that's a big deal. Normally, comic books superheroes of that rank are bisexual, not full lesbian.
That was my favorite joke when they made Superman bisexual. I was like, oh, he's finally gained the ability of invisibility.
Except in comic books, it's the most popular of the LGBT things to be, because then you don't have to worry about, because normally these characters have to retroactively be gay because of the AC, because of the comics code authority.
Yeah, just make everyone bi, and then everyone can hook up with everyone, and the stories are limitless.
You don't want to replace all those stories where they were dating women. No. So they would just make it sad if they were gay.
Later in life, he branched out.
But the other thing, like there were other things in there, like you couldn't show drug use. You couldn't show any form of dismemberment or like horrific gore, which actually, like even though they were tame by today's standards, this destroyed EC Comics horror comics. Like it literally shut down all their crime, all their horror, and even a lot of their sci-fi books couldn't operate under these new rules. They just had to make everything super tame, and then no one cared about the horror comics. In fact, it got so bad at one point, EC Comics ended up publishing only their humor books, which we all know is Mad Magazine.
Oh yeah.
They originally published like a whole line of like Western, sci-fi, war, all these things. War comics still continued because, propagandistically they were still they're popular. Yeah. War comics were actually the earliest comics to actually feature African Americans. Because most comic book companies wouldn't put African Americans in their comic books because they thought that Southerners would not buy the comic books.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Although there was the incidence of Captain Marvel, aka Shazam, having a black character in his comics, but
which one?
The depiction was racist enough.
I thought you were going to say Black Adam.
No. The depiction was racist enough.
Oh no!
That like children in the 40s wrote to complain.
Oh no!
So so like literally the creator of the comic actually published like an apology, and then the character never showed up again.
Oh Lord.
Which is pretty wild when you consider like the types of depictions of Africans and African Americans at that time period that were accepted in the media. So
I've learned too much about this already. I don't need to know about that character.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else that was important about the seduction of the innocent. There's not really that much to know about them, other than the fact that they were technically from Africa and they were technically Captain Marvel's slave. But
well, cool.
Yeah, no, the creator of Captain Marvel was kind of racist, but he was. But however, I will give him this: he was a more polite racist because he did issue an apology, something that today's racists would never do. But anyways,
yeah, took him out of context. That's the problem.
No, he admitted the context.
Yeah, I know.
Which like by today's standards, like that's pretty progressive for a racist.
I mean, it's sometimes it's all we ask for. Don't even get that.
An apology, and they never use the character again.
Yeah, that's all right. That's pretty good.
Yeah, no, by today's standard, that's almost saintly.
That's woke. That's woke BS.
I know how woke of him to cave to the complaints of letters by children.
Children.
He was called out by children.
That's
fantastic. Good for the children.
Good their parents are doing great.
But of course, comic books are turning the children into delinquents. And if there were, what's funny though is that Wonder Woman is actually an example of one comic where they might have had a little bit of a point. I don't know. Do you know anything about the creation of Wonder Woman? So the creation of Wonder Woman is the closest I can think of to a comic book that actually lines up with what the right thinks a woke anything is. It was created.
Right, she does have some pretty woke phrases.
So it was created by William Moulton, who, or as his pen name went, Charles Moulton, who is not just famous for Wonder Woman, but he was also a psychologist, and he had a whole psychological theory that that in his mind mapped perfectly onto BDSM. And yes, he was also a very strong feminist, and there's actually a movie about him and his marriage because it was a throuple. Him and his wife had a girlfriend who started off as their teachers as their TA. And he also was one of the inventors of the lie detector machine, but he didn't believe in patents, so he got totally screwed on the deal.
I mean, doesn't even work. Whatever.
But like the ideas he put into he intentionally wrote Wonder Woman because he thought it was important for girls to have a role model, but also for boys to experience strong female characters. He was a feminist. He did want to put feminist messages in his Wonder Woman book. They also featured lots of BDSM. Wonder Woman's original weakness was if she was ever tied up by a man, it would temporarily make her lose her powers until she was unbound.
Oh.
Yes, that is her original kryptonite.
Men is her kryptonite.
No. Being tied up.
Just tied up.
Just by
that. That is BD. Okay, I see.
Yes.
Wow.
And there's also stuff like pillow fights and spankings.
Ball gag of truth.
It is the lasso of truth because it was used to tie people up and force them to tell the truth, which is loosely based on his like BDSM things. Because he had a whole thing about dominance, compliance, and all these things.
Yeah, she has a safe word.
And like they really like the cop, like his stuff was risque enough that like DC Comics would be like, well, the readers are complaining again. You really need to tone that BDSM stuff down. He was like, okay, I will. So, and then he would make it raunchier. But yeah, no. He's a really interesting guy, actually. But yeah, no, like his comic actually was feminist propaganda with some sexual undertones. So like,
That's how I like my feminist propaganda, honestly.
yeah, no. He
Makes it go down easier.
he's the only comic book that really matched. What's funny is he didn't match what they were afraid of back then. He matched what they were afraid of today. Well, I mean, he did kind of also match what they were afraid of back then because like the BDSM stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah. Oh, and also there's Wonder Woman storylines from that time period where like they do stuff like where there's stories about like rehabilitative justice and stuff. Like the Amazons have a prison where people are reformed to be better people.
Oh, so it's in Denmark.
But yeah, so I think that covers the major points of the of the what happened with comic books.
The most well-researched part of this podcast.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, well, thank you, I guess. All right, what if?
Okay, so I mean, we could just go right into the Red Scare because that was around.
They were pretty much around the same time. There was no connection to those concerns.
Just remind everyone what the Red Scare was. We did it.
Cancel culture.
We defeated Hitler, but the two remaining superpowers in the world were communist and capitalist. Mm-hmm. So then
we had to cancel those communists.
Our old allies in the East were now our new enemies. Big Red himself. Mm-hmm. So that started infiltrating different areas of society. It often affected the creatives. Mm-hmm. So you have people in the arts. It affected intellectuals, so professors. Mm-hmm. You had a lot of people now being called in front of Congress. They had the House Un-American Activities.
You've seen Oppenheimer. You've already seen some.
Yes,
I was a big part of Oppenheimer.
The whole second half.
Kind of the first half too, because
device.
Yeah. The Red Scare was bad news. The Crucible, which is about that Salem witch trial that we talked about, is based on the Red Scare and what happened because the definition of a witch hunt actually refers to exactly what happened both in the Red Scare and the Salem witch trials. Because a witch hunt is where you go around and you line up everyone that you think is dirty, and then you just get them to name names of everyone that they say so that they can get out of trouble and those people can get in trouble.
Flipping people was a big part of the Red Scare.
This is also how the war on drugs works.
Yes.
You grab little guys, you make them either give you a deal or you put them in jail. If they don't give you names or they don't have names to give you.
People turn state's evidence in one of the Trump trials.
Yeah. So that doesn't mean the Trump trials are a witch hunt.
That,
to be clear,
not if you ask us.
Yeah, no, we don't think it's a witch hunt.
Or sociologists.
We've seen no evidence of it being like a witch hunt definitionally. The witch hunt would imply that Trump is being set up. Although, in fairness, sometimes in witch hunts, people actually do sell drugs and or be communists. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're innocent, but it is worth investigating. Is the crime really worth what we're doing here?
Right. Like if you would donated money to the Lyndon LaRouche campaign, who's this guy always running as a communist for president, like then you get swept up in this Red Scare thing. Something, a little thing like that.
And the thing is that Oppenheimer was never an official communist. He just had communist sympathies and was friends with lots of communists.
That's all it takes sometimes.
He believed in a lot of the causes the communists supported and would give money to those causes specifically. However, that stuff on paper still looks like Oppenheimer's a big old commie.
So then coming off the tail end of the Red Scare.
And did he marry both of them?
I believe so. I don't know. I'm getting all my information from the movie.
He had two. That's a good point. He had at least two significant relationships with women who were both at one point in their lives prominent members of the Communist Party.
And we all know wizards marry witches. So,
right. I mean, that depends on your. That depends on how you. That depends on whose like entomology you're using for. Wait, is entomology words or bugs?
Ent is bug, Et is word.
Etymology.
Because ent has ent, which sounds like ant, which is an insect.
Is that how you keep track of it?
That's my mnemonic, baby.
Okay, etymology of that word I was just talking about.
Yes. So coming out of the Red Scare, we also get the lavender scare, which is extremely similar.
It's the same thing, but for homosexuality.
It is. They're trying to find all the gays that work in the government, and it was primarily because they thought they were deviants, and if you're deviant in one area, oh well, then obviously you're gonna do something deviant in the government. You shouldn't have power.
Also, it's viewed as a national security risk because if the communists find out that they're gay, they could use that against them to gain state secrets. This is actually the reason that America forced China to sell Grindr. Because Grindr used to be a company just like TikTok that was technically owned by the Chinese government. And the US military became aware that there were military service people using this app, and they didn't want China to know who the gay soldiers were. Because a lot of people on Grindr are on the down low, apparently.
There's that thing where last time there was a national convention for the Republicans was in Cleveland, 2016, and Grindr had released their usage statistics for the week of that it was in Cleveland, and they were very happy to report that usage went up dramatically in the blocks surrounding where everyone was staying for the convention. They also one of the popular dating sites that it's perfectly okay if you don't upload a picture.
I watch this one YouTube channel that's run by a trans person who actually I forget if they're non-binary or a trans woman, but it's called Dead Domain, and they do a lot of undercover work where they will go to Republican or like hate-based churches. Actually, their most famous thing is they went undercover at a hate-based church, who you've probably heard of on the news. No, not that one. Not the other one. It's the other one. It's probably more than two.
Greg Locke's thing.
Okay, so anyway. I don't know which one it is.
Right, like you say hate-based church. I'm like, you gotta narrow it down, buddy.
But they infiltrated one of those, and they also did go to. They infiltrated. I forget which Republican thing it was. It might have been CPAC. And while they were there, they turned on their Grindr.
Heck yeah.
To like see how many men would be there on the down low, and apparently they got a lot of messages.
Good for them.
I definitely recommend Dead Domain. Check it out.
It sounds familiar. Maybe you mentioned it to me before. So following the lavender scare, that just goes into the 50s and 60s. There's just a gay panic is what it's referred to in the literature. And that's like they're recruiting your kids. They're going to make your kids gay. They're spreading disease. This is where you start getting a lot of those like stories about homosexuals that they're not based on anything true and are just trying to make them sound disgusting. Like a lot of it is like scat play. They're like, oh, all of the gay people do this. And there's a very small portion of everybody who does that, but they talk about disgusting things like that.
I am confident that there are plenty of gay people who think that poop is disgusting.
I believe you are correct on that. Yes.
I don't know how prominent it is or unprominent it is because I don't go around asking gay people what their thoughts on poop are.
I don't think these people in the Moral Panic did either.
Yeah.
This is so again, it's like the nuclear family is under attack.
Even though the nuclear family at this point would not have actually existed as a construct for very long.
Right.
Because obviously it didn't predate the term nuclear.
Well, I think that goes back to Democritus.
What?
I'm talking about the etymology of nucleus.
Okay.
That was Adam. Adam, he came up with the word for it. Never mind.
Confusing the shit out of me.
Good. I'm confused too, man.
Okay, because if the word nuclear is older than I think it is, I need to find out. But But the point is, the nuclear family as a construct is actually something from the 21st century. I mean, not the 21st, the 20th century. Um, and so the fears of like these types of things destroying the nuclear family are ridiculous for several reasons. Also, the nuclear family, or basically the concept of a family unit, is new to the 20th century. Families used to live on the same property until they got married. There used to be a lot bigger families, and even like specifically ethnic groups used to live in like much bigger families and family communities. The concept of the nuclear family or family unit is actually a shrinking and compartmentalizing of the family from into something that it typically does not occur via natural occurrences in a family, which is just suddenly there's two isolated parents and their kids. That's just not a thing that normally happens. That's not a normal thing until we created the nuclear family. That's what I'm saying.
So, and then we can talk about how, just briefly touch on feminism, because everybody is always panicking about that in some sense for the last half century.
It's true.
Because that, again, there's a very clear enemy and is threatening this family unit,
which is
and everything's going to change.
I do not understand the fears of feminism. Like anytime I ever hear anyone talk about what they have against feminism, it's just like, you have no idea what you were taught. You have not even heard a basic lecture on feminism. It's pretty absurd.
So the gay panic just simmers in the background until it kind of turns into an AIDS panic.
Okay, makes sense.
So, oh, I forgot what GRID stands for.
GRID?
It's what HIV was first called.
Oh.
The G stands for gay.
Really?
It's gay something immune disorder.
Wow, that's.
Let me look it up.
So it must have been a pretty big shock to them when straight people started getting AIDS.
I mean, Arthur Ashe. See, I'm a little older than you, so I remember when it was big that he came out. Also, Magic Johnson, they supposedly athletes who were supposedly straight also were getting AIDS.
I mean, Magic Johnson, I know at least had sex with a lot of women. Was he bisexual?
I don't know. Gay-related immune deficiency. So when AIDS first came out, it was
literally tacked on to homosexuality.
It was. So the AIDS panic was a gay panic. So in fact, people often talk about Ronald Reagan. There were all these gay people dying from AIDS, and it wasn't until one of his actor friends died where he was like, oh, maybe I should care about this portion of the population.
Wow.
Are you surprised? It's
no,
Ronald Reagan. Yeah, it's Ronald Reagan.
I'm surprised that got through to him. To be honest, what with the onset of what with him being a total son of a bitch, and also the onset of any dementia. Yeah, that's why I'm not afraid. America's been run by a president with dementia before.
I mean, his wife took care of it.
Yeah.
Joe Biden knows what's also.
I think Joe Biden just old as hell.
Yeah.
Quick note here. If you hadn't guessed by that commentary, this episode was recorded before Joe Biden dropped out.
So I forgot to go back. In 1964, we get Richard Hofstadter. So I'm reading all this stuff about panics, moral panics, and I was like, it reminded me of something. Richard Hofstadter had written an essay that was published in the November 1964 issue of Harper's Monthly.
Okay.
And it's a fascinating article because he goes through the history of the United States, and under all these paranoid conspiracy theories and how it's used in the political sphere in order to gain some push. So I mean, he dives deeply into anti-Catholic thought.
Interesting.
Anti-Catholic being very big, because
anti-Catholicism was still relatively big at that time.
Yeah, you can remember that.
What year is this again?
This was 64 when he published that. So that was like right around where we had elected our JFK.
Yeah, first Catholic
president. Again, people were afraid that he would be beholden to the papacy
that he would be loyal to Catholicism over the United States.
Yeah.
And by the Catholicism, we mean the Vatican.
I mean, and
the Pope.
you.
People have thought that if JFK became president, the Pope would control America.
Well, there was also he outlines in this article where they were publishing that if this person gets president, one of the so there was this idea with the Jesuits, which is a Catholic group.
I've heard of Jesuit
and
conspiracy theories before.
And it's like I can't follow all the
I mean, it's just repackaging of anti-Semitic stereotypes.
It was
Catholics.
but this was if a certain person had gotten elected president, and he's going back into the mid to late 1800s, it's like they will step down from the presidency and one of the Habsburgs will come in to become an emperor of America.
Wow.
So there's a lot of anti-Catholic, and he Hofstadter mentions this in the sense that at times in the country's past, it has been just Protestants and Catholics going at it.
Mm-hmm.
So
True.
The WASPs, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, are this group that's anti-Catholic, but then people also forget that the KKK, super anti-Catholic.
Yep.
They were very Protestant, very anti-Catholic, and it's not just these religious groups.
It's worth noting that almost all the unpopular white people of the early 20th century, and by that I mean people who we now look at as white, but who were not looked at as white back then, were typically also either Catholic or like some type of Orthodox. So we're talking Eastern Europeans, the Irish, still Mexicans, Italians. Actually, Italian stereotypes used to look a lot like what Mexican stereotypes look like today. I only discovered that from watching an old episode of The Simpsons where they hire an ethnically Italian maid. I'm sorry, not The Simpsons, The Flintstones.
Okay.
There's an episode of The Flintstones where they hire what is clearly an ethnically Italian cave woman maid.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's pretty wild.
So Hofstadter goes on in his essay too.
My point is Catholics.
And
Germans. A lot of Germans were Catholic. Also Lutherans, which probably they didn't feel much better about as WASPs go, because Lutherans are an offshoot of Catholicism, technically.
So Hofstadter had also talked about secret societies. So Freemasons he talks about.
Makes sense.
Because there were certain things about Freemasons that some people felt uncomfortable about, that it was because it's a fraternal society. They were thinking that you put your members above laws, and it's like, oh well, if we get Masons in the government, or if we get Masons on a police force, then if some other Mason does something bad, they'll get away with it. So we need to guard these institutions against these outsiders.
Andrew Jackson hated the Freemasons.
He hated a lot of things.
Andrew Jackson, though, actually basically tried to shut down Freemasonry in America at one point. Although, in fairness, the bad guys from Killers of the Flower Moon were Freemasons.
I do have to watch that.
Yeah, no.
So
Robert De Niro's character, big Freemason. There's a scene where he's paddling Leonardo DiCaprio in the Freemason Lodge for fucking up. I'm sorry, I just gave it. That's a kind of a spoiler. I should have let you get surprised by that.
It's okay. I was more shocked by your use of the F-bomb.
You watch this program.
Anywho, so I think at this time we'll just go into the Satanic Panic.
Okay.
Which is now we're entering my lifetime.
Okay, yeah.
So that was the 80s, and that's everywhere. Mm-hmm. So D&D we can mention first.
Yeah.
So it's this game. Oh, you can cast spells. Kids are playing it. Oh, they're taking it too far. They're going into tunnels. Mm-hmm. They're playing in real life. People are dying.
Which most of that's from a Tom Hanks movie.
Yeah, it's always well, a friend of my cousin heard this, Mm-hmm. So that starts invading everything. So people are paranoid about the Satanic Panic. This overlaps into things such as just New Age beliefs. And this goes on until like the 90s, even like up until like current times. You can hear like yoga is satanic. There's like all these little things. See, we have this good Christian society, and all these little things are trying to break in. They're trying to take us away from God, and we need to guard against them. So we have D&D, we have music lyrics,
backwards messages.
Yes,
on the record.
Backmasking, I think it's called. Yes, where they would take a recording from a popular rock song and they play it backwards, and it would just sound like, but they would find something that it sounded like.
The thing about that is that like we have zero evidence that your brain picks up on backwards messages. Because zero. Why would it? Why would it?
Because the Satanists. Our brains are pre-programmed to receive Satan.
Why would God do that, though?
He's tricky.
God's tricky?
They all are. So that, I mean, Harry Potter, another moral panic.
There was a moral panic about Harry Potter.
There's kids going around, they're waving sticks.
Pretty ironic now.
Also, it's not on my list, but I feel the need to mention. Have you heard the documentary? Oh wait, was it Finding the? Nope, I don't remember. Should have written it down. But in terms of the Satanic Panic, you do see it's getting bad in the 80s. It is weekly on Geraldo's show. Police are making intra-office guides and videos for finding like satanic graffiti, like, oh, maybe there's a coven that gathers at this place. Then you get like sort of a witch hunt type thing too, where adults who run daycare centers.
I heard about this one. The daycare.
Capturing the Freedmans, finding the Freedmans.
I think that okay. So I think I've seen the movie you're talking about there.
Yeah.
But that one's about a guy who was accused. There's several people who talk in that movie that make it seem pretty likely that he was a child molester, but like still a lot of the stuff, the way it went down, makes it all very
they're
suspicious. But he was a piano teacher who some of his students under hypnosis started saying that he molested them. But the hypnosis thing kind of makes the whole thing screwy Louie, because now like we have a better idea of how hypnosis works, and we understand that people under hypnosis are very open to like suggestive thought, and there's a lot of concerns about fake memories. It's a whole thing. Yes,
recovered memories is very controversial.
Some of the recovered memories didn't necessarily line up with reality, but some of them did, and right. The whole thing was a mess.
Well, the other thing too, so you have cases of people running daycares who suddenly a child comes home, says something that doesn't make sense. You have a parent who's swept up in the Satanic Panic, and all of a sudden they're like, oh well, we need to go to the cops. You have untrained cops interviewing children. Not knowing how to interview a child, so they're probably asking leading questions.
I mean, like, I know the one you're talking about. I forget exactly what happened, but like there were all types of accusations about tunnels under the daycare.
Right. Yeah, there's tunnels where they bring people in. They would have pregnant women who come in, they give birth, and then they sacrifice the child. They're not finding any remains. They're not finding any of these tunnels. But
now, to make matters more confusing, this story is often mixed up with another story that had similar elements to it. I forget, the government actually released all the documents from the investigation on it a few years ago. I read them; they're wild. But it is a story that gets confused with this one, and even then, a lot of people read the documents and they like go crazy with this one. I don't know if you've heard of this story. But essentially, there was a bunch of guys were found in a van in Florida with a bunch of kids who didn't seem to be theirs. It was all very suspicious. They got investigated. And the investigation led all the way up to this like commune thing where all these people were found to be living in this like cult-like situation. And like there were people there who could vouch as being the children's parents, but it still seemed like a very questionable child trafficking situation. and they did actually have tunnels under their compounds, and there were some things that looked satanic, and by that I mean they found a paper plate with a like a pentagram drawn on it, which is not.
It's a star. That's just a star.
It's not terribly not terribly convincing of anything.
Not damning evidence.
But like the documents the FBI lifted that were part of the documents in it were really interesting because according to the FBI, what they had stumbled upon was a forgotten CIA psyop that essentially at some point in like the 60s or 70s, the CIA had taken a bunch of people who were profiled as being like highly intelligent but unambitious, set them up.
I think I hear my name being called.
I know, right? Where was the CIA with my money?
Oh, yeah. Jeez.
But basically set them up to be like a fake cult to try and spread foreign disinfo.
Wow.
And they set them up as this. And then at some point just totally lost track of them. Like stopped giving a shit about them.
That's wonderful.
And then it turned out years later that they still just kept going with like creepy, possibly like pimping out their children to like foreign people and stuff.
See, this is
and
my
like,
I was
and so like that's what came about of it. But like a lot of people read a lot more into it than what it was, like because elements of that story are often transposed as evidence for the daycare story, but they're actually separate incidents.
This reminds me of my concept for the perfect 70s sitcom.
What's that?
It's
about a cult.
No, it was about a group of soldiers in a submarine in the 70s still going around fighting the World War because they never heard it was over.
Okay.
I think it could last a couple seasons.
All right, where were we? Yeah.
We were moving on.
All right.
So I was going to say next something. Yeah, we did Harry Potter. So I think we fully understand. I feel confident.
Have you ever talked to any of the people who were out protesting Harry Potter?
No.
I have. I think they're like Jehovah's Witnesses and stuff. Or possibly Pentecostals, whoever the people are who don't believe in Christmas.
Okay, I think.
But yeah, no, it was funny because I got to go to like the book releases would turn into huge deals around like bookstores.
Yeah, I remember like seeing news pieces about kids showing up in costume.
Like, yeah, no, in Hudson it was packed, like maybe hundreds of people waiting for the book to drop at midnight and stuff. And I went to a couple of them just to see what it was like, because it's back before everyone realized what kind of a mean bitch J.K. Rowling is.
Yeah, you can call her anything, and I'll agree.
Okay, fine. Yeah. Vindictive, crazy bitch. Okay, yeah.
She's very salty.
Like if she needs to chill the fuck out. Like, let people live their lives and stop writing murder mysteries designed to make people afraid of trans people. And then we can.
Yeah, I mean, it's a small ask. Where are the children writing her letters?
I know, right?
Would she listen to the children?
That means we have a lower class of children too.
Oh man!
Oh wait, hold on. No wait, there probably are children writing her. She's just not listening to them. She's probably just responding. You're not as gay as you think.
You've been brainwashed by the trans mob.
Yeah, no, probably. How many trans children do you think it would take writing to her to make her crack?
There aren't enough. I don't think it would.
You're right. It's a minority population, and she would ignore at least a few of them and possibly respond with, "You've been brainwashed by the woke mob."
Yes.
Oh, crap.
Okay.
Lower quality of authors, lower quality of terrible authors, and lower quality of children. This is what we're dealing with.
So now I would like to slide into things happening in modern day that I think would qualify.
That connects to J.K. Rowling.
J.K. Rowling, or just the whole trans debate, really. It's just that it's everything we heard about gay people in the 60s and 70s.
It is. Yep.
They're training they're grooming children.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Have you ever seen that? Have you ever seen the 1950s, early 60s propaganda movie about the dangerous homosexual?
Oh no. What does he have
I've
a
got an ep-
motorcycle?
I got an episode where I react to it.
I will look that up.
Yep,
Archive.org. There's some good stuff on there.
they're on YouTube, man.
Oh, okay.
It's yeah.
I go to primary sources.
But they're all the stuff they tried to say about the gay community back then is the same stuff they're saying about the trans community now.
Right. It's the same panic all over again.
Same tactics.
And we made it through that one, which gives me hope.
Do you ever? There is still a lot of propaganda from that time period that's going around. Like, have you ever heard of Jesse Lee Peters?
No.
Okay, so Jesse Lee Peters, you might need to check out Jesse Lee Peters sometime because Jesse Lee Peters is a trip. Also, he is probably closeted homosexual,
Okay.
but he is hugely anti-gay and anti-woman. He's a black minister who has a show called Fallen State because he believes in fallen state religious theology.
Oh,
which
boy.
I'm honestly like, I just want to sit in a room with someone who believes in that theology just so I can be like, why did Jesus die for us? Because like your entire philosophy sort of implies that Jesus died for nothing. But that's besides the point. But he is constantly spreading like misinformation about homosexuality. And one of the things that he will always bring up, and I don't even know if he understands he's referencing it, but he is. Are you familiar with the founder of the organization Focus on the Family?
Is that?
I don't remember.
I forgot. Name. Why don't I remember? It's doctor, but the funny thing is, he's like
he was
doctor.
A psychologist.
Yeah, it's like it wasn't like a doctor.
He's hugely controversial because
he's dead now, though.
He came up with like he had a psychological theory for homosexuality, and he took and a lot of the things he said about what causes homosexuality.
Okay, James Dobson
is the same stuff that Jesse Lee Peterson says on his show. It's all stuff about how like the stuff your mother and father did wrong to make you gay.
So that was James Dobson, who I don't know why I'm mentioning this, but he is Catholic, was Catholic.
Not surprising.
So that's interesting.
Those Jesuits.
What was I gonna say now?
Something about Dobson.
No, I was gonna mention Pat Robertson on the 700 Club.
Oh yeah,
because he's really into this gay panic thing, and he had even spread a rumor that like, oh, gay men, they have these rings that have like a little blade on the palm, and they'll shake your hand, and when they do, you'll get cut, and they have AIDS, so you get AIDS. They're willfully going around infecting people with AIDS because they're evil homosexuals.
That's fucking wild.
Yep. So this is all part of that panic around gay people and AIDS.
Have you ever looked into Tammy Faye Baker?
No, I don't want to.
No, her story's worth listening to.
Her husband's the jerk.
I mean, he was a jerk, even though later in life he did express like remorse for the he was like one of the guys who started the whole prosperity gospel thing.
Oh boy, huh?
Like even when he was going to evangelical school, they would be like, "No, your theories are wrong." He'd be like, "No, I think God wants us to be rich," and so but that was his thing. And like having watched like I think the movie's called The Eyes of Tammy Faye Baker.
Yeah.
I think they were both bipolar. But that is my theory because like but Tammy Faye Baker was a little crazy, but also she was a kind of a good person.
She felt bad.
Yes.
I know she regretted.
Well, here's the thing though. She's considered a gay icon now.
Because so was the Babadook.
But no, listen, because she was the only person in like the evangelical community who took a stand against AIDS. And she brought gay people onto her program to talk about AIDS. And when her husband had an affair and it came out is when Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson came in and stole their TV show.
Yeah, they had
when everyone found out that her husband had like forcefully had an affair, and like a recording came out, they basically stepped in and were like, used it as a chance to do a power move where they basically got rid of Tammy Faye and her husband because they had strongly disagreed with everything Tammy Faye was doing. And once her husband's thing came out, it like gave them the leverage they needed to like basically take over their televangelist show.
Can I do one more thing?
Sure.
The Bakers had an amusement park.
Right. They were
Heritage Land.
They were also really bad with money.
Heritage USA.
That's right. They were also really bad with money.
In the bustling metropolis of Fort Mill, South Carolina. You two could, I mean, I guess they have Bible Land. There's things like that, but this is like the first big one. And yeah, from 1978 to 1989, where it's 11 years of operation.
Wow. Yeah, no.
Missed out on that one.
I vaguely remember that from the movie.
Oh, okay.
But they were not good with money was the other thing.
Yeah. Well,
he was really bad with money. And she was really bad with money.
Yeah.
And they both had affairs, but his was a big deal because there was a recording of it. And it clearly at one point stops being consensual. Because he was only having an affair because he felt like he needed to balance things with Tammy Faye, who had a consensual affair. It's a whole thing. I recommend looking into it. But my point is that she was like this one person who like tried to embrace the homosexual community from that community, and it's sad that other people it's sad there is no one like that in that community now,
right?
Because I mean not that it did any good at that time either.
Well, there was
because like I said, they ultimately got rid of them.
In the gay panic was Anita Baker.
Okay.
Yes, I think that's her name, right? Does that sound right to you? No, because she
bad
was
with names.
Okay, she was. Yeah, I'm not great. So she was.
I was lucky. I remember Tammy Faye Baker's name.
Well, then why do
I don't remember her husband's name. Probably remember her name because it was the name of the movie. But okay. So what's the name?
Oh, no.
It sounded familiar.
Orange Juice, anti-gay. She was in Miss America. Anita Bryant.
Okay.
There it is.
You just got confused that I said Tammy Faye Baker.
I probably.
Okay, so what's her deal?
So there's Anita Bryant. She's huge in the gay panic. She's just she was like a Miss America. Oh, Miss Oklahoma. She didn't make it to the Nationals. She was a Miss Oklahoma, and then she used that to kind of parlay that into a mild singing career, and then she used. I mean, I've heard of worse. Vanessa Williams did better. Anywho, so she parlayed that into a mildly okay singing career, and then she used that to become extremely big in the anti-homosexual movements. So she was doing this thing where
a terrible career move.
She was the spokesperson for Florida Orange Juice. Okay. She sang a song about it. She was in commercials.
Okay.
So at gay bars, you would no longer order a screwdriver. You'd order Anita Bryant, which was a screwdriver, but they use apple juice instead of orange juice because they were boycotting Florida Orange Juice because they hired a homophobe as their spokesperson.
It's good for them.
Yeah. Gay bars are great.
Yeah. No.
So I'm thinking like
it's too bad. I wish that boycotting was a more effective political tool than it is.
Yeah.
But anyways, you were saying.
I was gonna say In the past few years, what have you seen online about CRT?
Oh my god! Here, hold on. I gotta stretch out before this.
Okay.
Ugh. All right. So
Okay.
CRT.
Yes.
Um,
First, what does it stand for?
the original. I mean, it stands for critical race theory. This is a academic theory that is mostly used in college. However,
It's used in like post undergrad. It's used in like
no,
law
it's like
school.
a high level of. I'm sorry, it's a high level of university. Because college doesn't offer master's degrees. But conservative pundit, influencer, whatever.
Well, first, let's say what it is.
Okay. It's just it's the idea of looking at the systems of society and understanding how race-based outcomes are affected by the system itself and past events in the system.
Right. It's a comprehensive.
Yes.
But it looks more at it from a race angle than you might otherwise hear.
And the thing is that it is descriptive, not prescriptive.
Okay,
it is an idea of looking at the system as things are.
It's an analytical tool.
Yes, not as things should be, but as things are. Yes, as an analytical tool.
So what's the internet say?
So
what's Dan Bongino ranting about?
I don't know who that is.
Oh,
actually,
okay.
wait, the name sounds familiar. Maybe I do.
He's sweaty. He's always sweaty.
I don't know who he is.
He's so sweaty.
But conservative pundit, conservative or think tank guy. I'm actually not sure what he does, but he's connected to everything.
Chris Rufo.
Fucking terrible. Yes,
Chris Rufo. We talk about Chris Rufo, who latched onto this.
Yes, because and he has publicly stated
he's
on Twitter.
It's very easy to look up.
Right there.
He's said it with his mouth.
He openly has made it clear that it does not matter what CRT stands
He's on
for.
a propaganda thing. He has said, I am doing propaganda, and everyone just listened to him without paying attention to that.
He has publicly stated that the purpose of attacking CRT, is to create distrust in the system and to essentially create an umbrella term that they can put everything they don't like or that they think they can make people uncomfortable with under the umbrella term of CRT. This is an admitted thing from the man who started the campaign to get CRT banned.
If you have an uncle who said that CRT is Marxist, he's been listening to this guy.
Yeah, and here's the thing, though. CRT is not inherently Marxist. That's just not, unless you think that all material analysis is Marxist, which conceptually material analysis is Marxist. But there have been plenty of people who analyze materialism who are not Marxist. And also, it doesn't even matter because it is descriptive, not prescriptive. However, what Christopher Rufo has basically done is said that CRT is a theory of thought that says white people bad, black people good, all white people are oppressors and all other races of people are oppressed.
Why's the Little Mermaid black? It's CRT.
Except that makes zero fucking sense. In fact, the Little Mermaid can't even be categorized as woke, which is a whole other thing. In fact, the thing that's fucked up about these various conservative movements that drives me goddamn crazy is that they want to create this language where they can interchangeably use these terms to basically just make people mad. Political correctness and wokeness don't have the same meaning, but they will use them as if they do. DEI and critical and affirmative action don't mean the same thing, but they will use them like they do. These are all separate things that have some crossover conceptually, but they do not actually coexist or cross over. Political correctness is about the concept of positive representation.
So DEI
is a series of
diversity,
equity, and inclusion. And all it is the series of corporate programs and special special counseling to essentially help corporations recruit people who aren't white and maintain and keep them from quitting. That's the purpose of DEI. to expand the range of how they are hiring people. It's not about lowering standards, not about making it easier for Black people. That's not what DEI means. DEI is about making Black people feel more welcome in your corporate environment, and not just and not just Black people either.
Before he was elected, President Biden said that he was going to pick a Black Supreme Court justice because we haven't had a lot. People freaked out. But the idea that someone is Black doesn't mean they're unqualified. We're not going to get an unqualified Supreme Court justice.
How hard do you think it is to find qualified Black people? Like, that's ultimately the question.
You're kind of telling on yourself a little.
Like, why don't you think there are qualified Black people available for these positions? And
you know what? I've been reading some of those Ketanji Brown Jackson dissents. They are bangers.
Okay, that's good to know.
She's doing well because she comes from a different background too. She was a public defender for a little bit.
Okay,
and that's reflected in the way that she analyzes law.
Nice. Okay, I like that. Public defender. They're going to look at it from the perspective of me, the guy getting arrested.
So what? Yes. So I'm bringing these up because like now that we have a framework for an idea and how to like view things as moral panics, we could look around like at things going on today and kind of use that framework and be like, okay, well, who's the marginalized group? Who's benefiting from this rhetoric? What might changes that this marginalized group want to come? How might that affect us? And who's afraid of that? Why are they afraid of that? So rather than flipping out about your children learning that that white people are evil,
which by the way
is not in CRT.
It's not the point of CRT.
It's not.
That is a very emotional response to being told that your ancestors might have done something fucked up.
Also, your 5-year-old's not learning CRT.
It's highly unlikely. Like, what would they even get out of that? It is a master's level concept.
Yes, this is for people who have been steeping in this level of thought for a good long time, and it's another analytical tool that they can use in their careers. You're not career focused in 6th grade.
CRT is an admitted hoax. That's what you need to remember.
Yes.
And the thing is that all the moral panics, that most of these moral panics are connected directly to Christopher Rufo. Christopher Rufo is a master of doing this shit.
If you have seen someone online saying that they should stop cutting the genitals off children, you're a victim of this moral panic.
Let me tell you, I have specifically looked into this. There is a report, I might even still have it on my computer, that I have read, a document from JAMA. I forget what that JAMA stands for, but I have read it.
Journal of the American Medical Association.
And the reason I read it was because I heard a conservative, and actually like a center-leaning conservative, in a debate talk about why he was concerned about this document. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go read that document. And what I discovered is that A, I understand why he's concerned, but B, his concern is based on him not understanding how psychology or therapy work. The thing that they are confused by, the thing that they are concerned about in the JAMA report is that there is no medical limitation. It's the medical limitation on how urgent a teenager's transition is based on urgency and not age. Okay. There is no specific age. And the reason for that isn't that it is, oh, we can get them as young as we want. No, it's because it is based on urgency. How urgent is the need for what level of transition? And this is the other thing you need to understand.
There's multiple levels of transition.
Yes.
Social transitioning
is just changing your pronouns, just changing the way you present in terms of clothes, hair,
haircut,
anything
your name,
like that.
maybe.
Yes, some might.
These are real low-level things. Maybe what bathroom you use.
Most people, and I say most people because medical malpractice does happen, and most people are going to need to be in this are going to need to socially transition for a minimum of like 6 months before they can move on to like whatever the next stage of it is. Now, because it's a mental health thing and because people could be potentially might have suicidal ideation connected to it, there are exceptions that are made for some people. However, the reality is that trans children and their parents do not all make the same choices. I went through the report. Not every kid who is transitioning, not every kid who is transitioning, all children will only do social transitioning. Unless there's like something weird going on, like medical malpractice or some type of wild level of urgency. This is hyper rare. I understand that there's a reality show about some person who did this. Thanks a lot, you weirdo. Why would you make a reality show about it? Because they did it super young, apparently. They're a weirdo because they made the show, not because they're trans. Just to be clear.
I knew that.
Okay, I know. You gotta stop them before they get confused.
Don't get taken out of context.
But the point is that the standard of medical care is this: no one gets bottom surgery before 18. The medical standard is that bottom surgery is for people who are 18 and up. There have been rare incidents of people getting top surgery before 16. But almost all top surgery, and top surgery is only done in the situation of people who are born female, who are assigned female at birth, transitioning to being male. I mean, sorry, I shouldn't say male. Transitioning to be man.
Thank you.
Typically, that top surgery, can't occur if they're on puberty blockers. So puberty blocker people do not get top surgery. Not all children will be given puberty blockers. Puberty blockers are completely reversible.
Yes.
I am aware that puberty blockers are also used to chemically castrate people.
There's also,
the chemical castration is temporary and can also be reversed with testosterone, a thing we sadly know because some pedophiles have done that.
May I like to point out that
sure.
You're saying
the thing about puberty blockers was that?
Yeah, puberty blockers.
Exists for precocious puberty.
Yeah, there we go. That's what I was gonna say. Precocious puberty. Like they're used for non-trans kids and have been for quite some time.
Yes.
But I think the reason I wanted to talk to you about this is that every day I see this trans panic, and I'm like, oh, this is the gay panic all over again.
It is.
It really is. And once you realize that and view the world through that lens,
it's just a reboot.
You're just like, oh, I've seen this one before.
The trans panic is just the gay panic reboot.
It's edgier.
It is a little bit edgier.
Yeah.
Oh, there's like a pun in there about knives.
No.
No, you're right.
No. I do have some others.
Wait, okay.
Modern immigration.
Yep, there is.
But that was even mentioned in the Hofstadter essay.
Immigration has always been something that has been used for populist moral panics.
He was concerned about, this was the 60s, so he was reflecting on previous times where we were getting like poor European immigrants.
Mm-hmm. Those Irish and Eastern Europeans.
Yes.
And Italians and Germans. Probably some Spaniards.
Oh yeah.
But
now it's Mexicans.
Yes. Although I have heard them start to like bring Asians into the equation. In terms of
wait, is that another Red Scare because China's communist? Yeah, it's just
actually yes.
Yeah.
Although there has been an increase in southern border crossings that are from countries that are not Central or South America. The big thing that's happening right now that people need to understand is that what is happening right now is we have an influx of refugees because there is so much instability in Central and South America, but also in Europe and Asia.
Well, good thing the U.S. has nothing to do with Central and South American instability.
Yeah, no. In many ways, it is our fault that lots of these Central Americans are fleeing to our country. Oh man, I don't want to get sidetracked, but Argentina is so fucked.
Yeah, I mean,
Um, but oh, that's fireworks. Okay, there was somebody shooting them off like right across like the block from my house the other day. Like I could see them over the neighbor's house. Super low too. I was like, thank God it rained.
yeah.
Where were we?
I mean, that's about it. I do have feminism here, but we kind of touched on that already.
I mean, like I feel like there's still a little bit more to say about some of these modern ones, to be completely
I mean,
honest.
I don't know. I've searched my memory banks. I think I was primarily uh, impelled to do this because the trans panic.
It's getting bad.
It's
I'm very afraid for trans people.
I hug your trans friends.
100%. Definitely do that. Like America, fucking Ohio just passed that bathroom bill.
Ohio is getting worse.
Bathroom bills are a fucking stupid idea. I'm just going to tell you this right now. Bathroom bills are a fucking stupid idea. Bathroom bills are bad for everyone. There's no win to like putting restrictions on bathrooms.
Are you a cisgender woman who maybe doesn't like wearing makeup and has short hair
There have
and maybe wear a lot of like gender neutral clothing?
there have already been incidents of androgynous people being hassled on their ways into bathrooms. There was an incident here in Ohio. There was an incident in Southern Ohio where a trans man was nearly assaulted because what happened was this trans man was visiting a campground with his mom. And just to be clear, for those who are not up on the lingo, a trans man was assigned female at birth. They were born and assigned female at birth, and they are now transitioning from female to man. Okay, so from woman to man, the transition from woman to man. That's important for you to understand because some people get confused when I try and explain the story to them. What happened was he went to a campground. He wanted to be respectful of the owner of the campground's rules. So he actually went to the owner and was like, hey, I'm a trans man. Which bathroom should I use? Problem. Sorry, getting out of myself. So owner of the campground, being kind of conservative, tells the trans man he would prefer that they use the women's restroom.
Yeah, use the vagina room.
Yes.
You have a vagina.
It's
very reductionist thinking.
I honestly, I don't know what level of transition they were at, but I do know that they passed for male. Should say passed for man.
Yeah, trans men always have the best beards.
There's a lot of pictures of trans men on the internet, people, and a lot of them pass.
Yeah, because there's none of the weird clocking things you normally. It's just like a short guy who's bald and has a beard.
Yeah, frequently. And some of them are jacked.
Yeah,
like huge muscles.
Yeah,
look like goddamn lumberjacks.
I mean,
but the point is that this gentleman, this trans man, he used the women's restroom as he was instructed to by the owner of the camp because that was his assigned at birth sex. I'm using those words interchangeably, and I know I need to learn to do it better than that. But the point is, he uses the restroom. What happens? Some cis women in the bathroom feel uncomfortable because he looks like a man.
Because he looks like he should be like selling barbecue sauce at a state fair.
He gets out of the bathroom where he's confronted by some men who I believe knew the women. Okay. And it almost escalates into a fight. The police have to be called because even as he's trying to explain himself as a trans man, a lot of people do not understand how trans men fit in. In fact, trans men are almost like the bisexuals of the trans community because they get ignored.
Trans men, yeah. The transphobes and the transpanic regularly ignore the existence of trans men.
If it wasn't for the panic over top surgery, we wouldn't hear about them.
Yes, because any of this sensationalist dialogue that you hear surrounding this is always like, man is dressing up as a woman and gonna go somewhere to assault children. First of all, plenty of men dressed as men are doing that already. I don't see why they would feel the need to
It's
change their.
unnecessary.
Yes,
It's unnecessary. Side note: cis men can go completely looking like men and hide in a woman's restroom until women are vulnerable. There's nothing to stop this. There's no real way to enforce bathroom bans because bathrooms are the Wild West. Okay, there's no laws that aren't going to like impede our privacy when it comes to regulating bathrooms. It's a mistake.
It's not going to end well.
No, it won't. It won't. But anyways, this guy had to go and like the police had to come and take him away. It sounds like it ended up for his own protection, but also was fucked up at the same time in the initial arrest.
He, from his viewpoint, I dare say mine, I don't know what else he could have done. He even was considerate.
The police were called on him, though, was the thing that's fucked up.
Yes.
And, oh, you mean about going to the camp and talking?
No, it's like, because he thought he was like, okay, if I do this, I won't get in trouble. And it still happens.
But, like, he would have been better off just going to the men's room and using a stall. Like, I once again, I don't know their level of transition. Maybe he didn't need a stall. The point is that the hysteria around the idea of trans men is deeply problematic. Now, I have watched a lot of debates on this, and I've come to several conclusions about it. Why do you apologize?
Oh, that sounds rough, man.
I don't know. I enjoy the blood sport of debate, but I have learned several things, which is one of which conservatives do not understand the difference between sex and gender. Very clearly, they do not understand the difference.
We have not yet we're using a lot of language that you would use in this sphere. And if you're unfamiliar, so he mentioned assigned female birth. There's assigned female, assigned male. Now, this is something I found out like within the past year. Mm-hmm. This is not because that's done visually oftentimes.
Yes. And that can also be wrong.
Yeah, there are ambiguous genitalia.
Mm-hmm. Intersex people exist.
1 to 2% of the population, you're probably not gonna be able to look and judge what sex they are. Sorry. Okay, that's another thing we should talk about: sex and gender. Sex being physical.
Yes.
So
sex is represented
genitals,
in pheno and genotypes.
Yes. Genotype, your genes.
Your XY chromosomes.
And then phenotype is the way those genes present.
Yeah.
So
your genitals, your chest,
that's sex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's something. Now, gender is whom you internalize yourself to be. Mm-hmm. Now, this could be man, woman, non-binary, a whole slew of other genders. That is gender, which is different from sex. Now, a lot of times in these arguments, I'll see that the people who are caught up in the panic don't know the difference between those two things.
This is what I have learned from listening to debates on this topic, is that the understanding is just not there on the conservative side. And to be fair, part of that is because for any sort of moral panic to succeed, you have to sort of fudge or play with the generalities of what you're doing. You can't keep it simple you got to keep it simple, and you got to keep it as like convoluted as possible. Have as many things overlap and be confusing. I could probably make an entire episode where I just go over the different terms that the right is misusing, and we've touched on some of them. Wokeism and political correctness are used interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. Wokeism is the understanding of systems in society that keep people down. Political correctness is the idea of positive representation in both government and media. And those things are not inherently the same. DEI is used interchangeably currently with affirmative action. Not the same things at all.
Yes, affirmative action is quota driven.
And even then, the quota thing is blown out of proportion. It's more like you want to get different types of people in on your thing. And so what you do is you look at the top people from each of those categories. So it's black people competing against black people, Asian people competing against Asian people. This is how universities do it. I don't know how jobs do it.
And there was a recent Supreme Court decision, so I don't know how that factors into
that system. Might not actually work well because it resulted in wacky outcomes for Asians specifically. Yeah. But these things are not the same thing. And when it comes to trans people, there's a lot of terms that are thrown around that are not the same thing. Being trans is not the same thing as being a drag queen.
Okay, they're completely different.
Technically, I mean, you could be trans and be a drag queen.
You could be.
In fact, all the categories I'm about to name, you could hypothetically discover you are trans via being one of these things.
You can be a drag performer and be a cisgender woman. There are some.
There are. You can also be a drag performer and be a gay man, be a straight man, be a non-binary person. Because drag is a type of performance art.
It's heightened burlesque to a certain extent.
Yes, or it's a variant or break off or spin off of burlesque. Even though it also has non-burlesque origins as well, what with things like Shakespeare or the British theater styles of pantomime. Which pantomime has a history of having child-appropriate shows, although they also have adult-friendly shows.
But this is also it is a manner of dress specifically for a performance.
Yes, and then you got
drag queens are drag queens only on stage,
and then you have cross-dressers, formerly known as transvestites. We don't use that term anymore, though, but that's a whole other thing too. Cross-dressers identify as their sex. They just like wearing the opposite sex clothes. It's technically a separate thing.
I have a friend, and he adopts a persona when he dresses in women's clothes. And again, totally straight, married to a woman, but he does enjoy that.
Mm-hmm. So like these things are not the same thing, but the right uses them interchangeably. Because it creates confusion and it makes it seem like trans people are more prominent in our society than they actually are. Intersex people actually, by population percentage, are more common than trans people. Trans people are roughly, according to the numbers I looked up, roughly just under 2% of the population, and intersex people, are just over 1% of the population, and intersex people are just under 2% of the population.
So what we're saying is you probably met a lot of intersex people and you never knew.
It's true. And there actually might be more intersex people, because a lot of intersex people are intersex in a geno level of their sex, and no one knows.
Yeah, you'll see problems sometimes with Olympic athletes, where the way their gender, their sex assigned at birth, is it's just what they went with and what they were told, and they have no idea that they have different genetic things going on until they get into like this rigorous scientific area where they actually have to pass certain tests.
Yeah. And honestly, like almost everything that people try to use against like trans athletes borders onto like eugenics type like reasoning about things too. It gets messy as hell.
Oh, right.
We haven't even talked about the sports. Being afraid of trans people in sports is also part of the trans panic.
It's not borne out by any scientific data.
It's not borne out by even sports statistics.
Yeah.
Like, the way you do it is you hold up any example of a trans person winning as like, oh, trans people are unstoppable athletes. And you just ignore every time they lose. Like Leah Thomas winning that one competition.
Well, no, she came in 5th.
No, she
won
competed in 3 things.
I'm just thinking about the Riley Gaines thing.
Well, yeah, no, when that one, she came in like she tied for 4th.
Yeah.
But
like, she beat a cis woman who made it her whole personality that trans women are evil.
Yeah.
Like that's all she does now.
Yeah.
Like imagine coming in 5th, then like that's the trajectory you take. If I could mention 2 things about laws negatively affecting kids.
Go ahead.
So the fact is that there are a tremendous amount of laws being passed at the state level to exclude trans kids from sports. And to the extent where there are more laws than teenage trans athletes. That's the statistics. And there was one state where they went through and I forgot what state it was. I'm sorry, but they found it applied to one girl, and they asked the coach, and they're like, I guess we have to follow the laws, but she's not even that good. Another thing Now this goes back almost 10 years ago to Texas. And this predates like the real blossoming of the transpanic.
Mhm.
And if you had to assign male or female based on what you were assigned at birth.
Mhm.
So there was a trans man, well, boy, I guess, who I think he was in his senior year, he was taking testosterone.
Oh, okay.
So, but the law said, no, this is right. 2 years in a row, I think he won the championship because they made him wrestle women.
Yes, this is the thing I was going to talk about, is because the sports are where trans men get to conveniently be invisible for the right. The right typically ignores trans men athletes.
I think it's not just sports; it's all the time.
No, I mean it is all the time,
Yeah.
except for when it comes to surgery, because the top surgery
Yeah,
is
yeah,
the
yeah.
only time that they talk about trans
Also,
men.
like if you're deep on like anti-trans Twitter, they're fascinated with like the skin you have to remove from your arm for a phalloplasty.
Okay.
Like anytime they draw a picture of a
makes sense.
woke
It's very
individual, they're soft.
Okay.
Compare it.
Not
Or
now,
my-
Thomas. Not now.
Ruben Uncut After Dark.
The dirtier version of this, the dirtier, more cust-filled version of the show.
Fuck yeah.
Shit, what was I gonna say?
Trans men in sports.
Yeah, trans men in sports get ignored because it breaks up, it destroys the concept,
The narrative.
it destroys the narrative of the solution being to force athletes to play on the side on like the teams that they're assigned at birth gender. And the reason it destroys it is because trans men, once again, for those who get lost easily, that's people who were assigned female at birth and have now transitioned to being men.
So they
dominate cis women in sports because they are taking testosterone.
Yes.
So this, in fact, would not be a solution because cis women cannot win against trans men. However, trans women lose all the time. And well, this might change because there's a trans woman in one of the events this Olympics.
Yes. They identify as non-binary.
I'm not talking about the soccer player.
Oh, wait, I'm talking about the runner.
Oh, they are also non-binary?
If we're talking about the same person, I don't remember their name.
I was talking about, so previously there was only one despite being allowed to be in the Olympics since 2004, there's only been one gold medal trans athlete in the Olympics, and they were a non-binary AFAB person, that means assigned female at birth, for those who couldn't put the letters together, on a women's soccer team. So far, trans people have not taken over sports in any way.
But if all the panic were true, it would be everywhere.
It would.
It would be like a real thing that normal people would notice.
And the right is pushing this so hard, they made a terrible, terrible movie about it.
Oh yeah, you watched it.
I did. Lady Ballers. I have a whole video where I went over it. On YouTube, there might be a thing up here that takes you to it.
Oh, fancy.
Yeah, no, I figured out how to do that. But Lady Ballers is terrible. And Lady Ballers is also, like a lot of stuff here, on the record bullshit.
Was it written by non-comedians and then acted out by non-actors?
Yeah, no, it was written by failed writers.
Okay.
And failed directors to be acted out by failed actors.
Fantastic.
And one canceled comedian who arguably is actually the most talented person in the movie. And that's not saying much at all.
No.
But according to Ben Shapiro himself, when talking with the director of the film, Jeremy Jeremy Boring.
Because they both have an OE.
Yeah, no. It's still terrible names.
Boring?
But Jeremy Boring, who, by the way, inserts an ad for his own razors into the movie.
Oh, I saw one of those ads. It's filmed at Daily Wire headquarters.
Yeah, no.
Daily Wire being a right-wing propaganda company.
Who produced Lady Ballers for their streaming site. But anyways, lady, according to them, in this interview, Ben Shapiro puts forward that he originally suggested to the guys who thought of writing the movie that the movie should be done via like a documentary style like Borat.
Right.
They wanted to actually put men into women's sports and see how it would go. However, they couldn't make that movie because it was required that men take women's hormones, for at least 2 years before they could compete.
I mean, I saw The Machinist. Maybe Christian Bale would do that for a role.
I mean, Christian Bale would do anything to his body for a role. But the point is that the conceit of the movie is bullshit. You can't get onto women's teams that fast. In the movie, they don't go through any of that. The movie does not represent what trans athletes have to do. At no point do they get any hormones. And this is built into the lie. The fear that they are trying to put into you is because this is a psychological thing that can't be firmly assessed. Trans people are on the honor system, and they hate that. They want to be able to see on paper, bam, instantly we know. Because, and that's the thing, they want you to be afraid of the fact that trans people don't have to prove they're where they belong. They will constantly put forward the idea that, oh, a man can wake up tomorrow and just decide they're a woman. No.
Nobody's doing that.
That's not a thing. And if someone does do that, it's because they're an opportunistic psychopath, not because they're trans. And to punish trans people for someone who might be an opportunistic psychopath, taking advantage of the way society treats or does not treat trans people, is not fair. It, in fact, is statistically ridiculous. The laws trying to fight against, like, I'll tell you this right now, the laws against gender-affirming care for minors are bullshit. They are directly putting the government into your healthcare and your child's healthcare. Not only that, but the major problem with it is that the fear it's running on is the idea that these children will be pushed into it. And that's not how, I've read the JAMA report. That's not how the system works. There are checks and balances to it. Believe it or not. If you get all the way through it and get a surgery without going through checks and balances of this system, then that means there was medical malpractice and you can sue. And I'm sorry, but you shouldn't be able to take away the health care from all trans children and their families just because either A, somebody was affected by malpractice of a doctor, or B, someone's parents had Munchausen syndrome, which is a disorder where you basically prescribe disorders onto other people.
That's Munchausen by proxy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Munchausen when you do it to yourself, Munchausen by proxy. Sorry. Your fear that there are parents who have Munchausen by proxy just putting trans onto their kids. We shouldn't be punishing all other trans kids because someone's mom or dad might have Munchausen by proxy. That's not good. That's not how that should work. I've had that one in me for a while.
Very cathartic.
Mm-hmm. And also, I'm sorry that neither of us are trans. I'm gender non-conforming, but I still identify as a man. And Thomas here, you can't. He seems like a man.
Pretty cis.
Yeah. So,
but honestly, I could be a trans man. You wouldn't know.
So, honestly, if you are watching this, please go watch actual. If you want to learn more about this, please go watch actual trans content.
May I recommend the YouTube channel ContraPoints?
I don't know ContraPoints as well, so I can't back that one up. But I'm going to recommend things like Dead Domain as a good one. I only like to recommend things I've actually watched a bunch of. I'll take your word for it.
Well, no, she makes extremely long essays. She's a little bit of a theater kid, I guess, because they're pretty dramatic. It's not like straight to camera like this. She'll like do little skits. Um, but I don't know what her training is, but she's very analytical and like draws on a lot of things from history. And these videos sometimes are 2 hours, and she's very smart. I think she's back on Twitter. At one point, she got bullied off of it. Um, but she's one of the trans voices that I really like listening to, just because I'm a little bit of a theater nerd too.
I won't lie. Some of the main trans creators I follow on YouTube are more about like transmedia analyzation, like invasive.
Well,
And
she did like two
and
hours on incels,
oh,
things like
Lisa
that.
Simpson's good.
Real quick, last note here. I said Lisa Simpson. That is incorrect. Them and their channel are called Lily Simpson. Hopefully you understand my mistake.
She's not the cartoon character.
Okay, yeah, it took me a second to figure out what's going on.
She's a New Zealander who analyzes trans representation in like movies and television. It's good stuff.
But yeah, sorry that we're
the way we are.
Yeah,
I will say it's very not. It's very. There are people who like to do identity politics, and I understand a lot of the identity politics argument for this. But I will also say that when things reach a certain critical level in society, I think it's actually bad if like cis people don't say something.
Yeah.
Is that
also
like,
may I say something quick about identity politics?
Okay, sure.
One of my favorite things is like, I'm not into identity politics. I'm just a simple blue collar redneck who doesn't care about politics. I'm like that's identity politics.
It is, yes.
Like it's a much more broad category than you think it is.
Yeah, no. And besides that, conservatives invented identity politics. They just intended for it to always stay negative. And once it became positive, they got mad about it. Even though they also use identity politics positively for their Christianity.
For sure.
And I want to say once again, I have nothing against Christians, although I do think that evangelicals, little satanic. They're a little satanic. I'm sorry, but like every time I watch like evangelical like videos of evangelical services, my major thought is, dear sweet Christ,
so
what am I watching?
I didn't mention,
they're so full of theater.
Speaking of negative identity politics, I didn't touch on QAnon, but the QAnon precursor, because QAnon is just too big of a conspiracy theory to even really try to target. There's so many offshoots, but it started out as Pizzagate.
Mm-hmm.
So Hillary Clinton's emails were stolen and then released online, and one of her head people, there were a bunch of emails. So they said things like, let's go to, there was a pizza place they like called Comet Ping Pong. So this whole thing was like made out of cloth. There's just like whole cloth. These people whom they wanted to beat at the polls were it's all your old favorites. They're kidnapping kids, satanic panic. They're murdering the kids and drinking their blood, anti-Semitic blood libel. They're doing it. It's a piece of the shop. So again, it's kind of a moral panic, but it's really more of a conspiracy theory.
Well, what I'm hearing is these moral panics never really go away. They just like
change forms,
filtered into the zeitgeist of society, and then reoccur when enough people have been like turned on to like these pretty bad ideas.
So it's just shitty moral panics until we die.
Oh, that doesn't sound good. But yeah, so QAnon, even what they're doing with DEI is they want to make everything into a moral panic. Like
really, it's just
like
if Richard Hofstadter was still alive, the things he would have to say, yeah. Because everything is an outrage, everything is a panic.
Like the fact that they don't understand.
Oh, okay. So I mean, this isn't a moral panic, but I was gonna say, like, if you look at the statistics, do you know how violent crime is doing in America?
My understanding is that violent crime is going down.
It's like lowest it's been in half a century. There was a brief uptick during Trump, and then we beat the Trump crime wave and it went back down. But if you ask people what the crime rate is like in America compared to 5 years ago, they say it's worse. Like on the right, this is especially bad. They're like, I won't go to a city, and you look up the crime rate for New York City, and it's safer than most small towns. Like it's a very safe place, but they're always stoking fear. It's a fear-based economy, and you just got to look through that.
So I saw Inside Out yesterday.
Oh, I enjoyed it very much.
I was tripping balls, and it was very uncomfortable.
Oh.
Because so much of the new movie is just all this teenagers doing stuff that makes you cringe. But I understand that's the point. But like the whole thing is that anxiety takes over, and anxiety is essentially trying to build everything from this negative anxiety perspective. And it ends up creating a sense of self in the main character, Riley, that reflects back as I'm not good enough. Because anxiety is trying to take over and so that they can plan for the future, but they plan for the future by anticipating everything bad that could happen. And essentially, this just leads to a point where, since the new self is based entirely on fear, it can only ever have this negative perspective, because it's always about what you're not or what you could do wrong, not about what you were good at or who you are or what your positives are. And like that's the thing, is that if you're taking in media that is largely asking you to be afraid
of things that are not even to be feared, mild changes in the social fabric that don't affect you on a daily basis,
and that's the whole thing. Oh, and vaccines are part of
it now. I mean, that's
like vaccines.
Yeah.
Oh, vaccines. What's crazy?
Have you noticed how many young people are dying suddenly, Ruben? Probably the same amount that always were. Also, everybody in the world probably got COVID at some point. And that's a very bad virus to have gotten.
I've looked into this, and like heart attacks in young athletes are actually not uncommon. Like that is actually a very common way for young athletes to die.
Probably because they're juicing.
I don't want to make moral assumptions
about dead kids. Sounds good.
About dead people in their like 20s. There's a lot of moral panic going on, and it's very concerning.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything left to touch on or how we should wrap it up.
Stay clear-eyed out there.
Oh, we didn't touch on the replacement theory.
Oh, well, I mean, that ties into immigration. Do you want to say what replacement theory is?
So
it's also anti-Semitic too.
In its original, it is, even though a lot of people are trying to present it in a non-anti-Semitic light these days. But the concept, its origins are anti-Semitic.
George Soros is funding the immigrant caravans. Conspiracy theories are always going to be anti-Semitic.
I have to address the George Soros thing. Okay, people, here, I'm not a fan of George Soros. I don't like what George Soros does is questionable. But here's the thing you need to understand. What George Soros does is not special.
He gives money to organizations.
Like literally, this is what is called being an entrepreneur or investor. What he does is what super wealthy, powerful people do. If you're freaking out about George Soros and ignoring the Koch brothers, it says a lot about what your actual politics are. And even then, there are people beyond the Koch brothers. Although it's just one Koch brother.
I remember I heard an interview on a New York Times podcast. They were talking to a venture capitalist who just
that's the word I was looking for. Venture capitalist.
Yeah, he really likes liked Nikki Haley. So he's just like, yeah, I thought now this is a venture capitalist. His idea is like his whole thing is that he finds investments that he thinks are worthwhile. He puts money into them, hoping to get something back. So he just wrote a check for $1 million off to Nikki Haley, because he liked her, and he also funded a group of musical artists to write and record a Nikki Haley theme song, and that is just about as bad or good as anything that George Soros does.
Like, you have to understand that George Soros is a venture capitalist. And as a venture capitalist, what he does is influence power with money. And you know what? We used to have laws against that kind of stuff, or at least laws that limited that kind of stuff. But we eventually got rid of them because we as a country have no sense of self-preservation.
Citizens United.
Yes. But the point is that you can't just fear George Soros because people tell you to. What he does is not particularly unique. It's done by literally thousands of shitty people.
Probably some good people too.
Although it's hard to tell, and there is no ethical consumption under capitalism.
Amen. There we go.
Which means there's also very little in the terms of ethical investment.
Well, I think you end right there.
You think we end right there?
With an anti-capitalist statement?
Sure. Why not? Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation / neurodiverse people spewing things at you.
I would not like watching that.
I mean, that's a lot of YouTube, really.
Yeah, oh, that's true. Maybe I would.
But yeah. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this on YouTube, then please like and subscribe and click that bell. If you are watching this on a podcast platform, then do whatever it is your podcast platform gives you as an option to show your appreciation. And if you would like to contact the program, say you're a sociologist who wants to correct me on some of these things.
That would be nice.
Or you are a trans person who'd like to share your story. I'd love to have you on.
That would be great. I also wanted to point out that while I was researching this, I found out that a lot of social workers are taught the theory about moral panics.
That makes sense.
Which is fascinating.
That makes sense.
That's smart.
I think that's smart. Yeah.
Like those children who were supposedly being smuggled through underground tombs to witness satanic sacrifices probably should have talked to a trained social worker.
Mm-hmm. That would probably have helped.
Yes.
But you can email me at rubenuncut@gmail.com.
Yes, defund the police and pay more social workers.
I don't want to open the
no, we're not okay.
The whole can of worms. There's so much to explain.
Yeah.
Because it's not really a very well thought out slogan.
It should have been something more like reallocate funds, but that doesn't roll off the tongue.
Yeah, no, it sounded good to the people who wanted to use it.
Yeah.
But the point is, I hope you had a good time. All right, Thomas, it's time to say goodbye.
Thank you for listening.
Have a wonderful whatever, wherever, whoever you are. Was that a gang sign?